On Monday, you finished international relations, and today you're starting with me world history. So basically, world history and international relations go in tandem, could be first or second. Mostly it is either world history first, then international relations, or international relations or world history. That's 15 classes. This is 10 modules total. So 10 classes in total. And the point is that both of them go together because both of them are complementary to each other and in a way add to each other's story. But I'll tell you what history is or what you need to understand as history. Before that, I'll tell you about myself first because a lot of you don't know who I am, or you've only seen me in CNA, in which I don't introduce myself, or you will have now a longer journey with me, a much more elaborate journey with me, except for that 1 hour in CNA. So, good morning to all of you. And the students who don't know me, who just know my name, I am Abhishek Mishra, yes, and I'll be teaching you world history in this journey. But if you've been a part of our family, you would know ancient, medieval, art and culture, world history, post independence, modern. 6 parts make up history, and except for in certain batches, I take all of history with you. And the question which becomes important is what qualifies me or what gives me the right to teach you history, because that matters. That way, you need to trust me with what I'm teaching you, because I'm coming from a background in which we've gone to a level wherein we do research, and now we are at the GS level of UPSC. So, as I said, I'm Abhishek Mishra, and I've done my BA honors in history from Sri Venkateswara College, Delhi University. I'm all through University of Delhi. Thereafter, I've done my masters from St. Stephen's College, again Delhi University. Therein, I did my MPhil, and I'm basically a specialist of what we call as Portuguese and English history on the Western Coast. My MPhil project or my MPhil title was Policing in Western India, a study of Bombay and Goa. And thereafter, I'm doing my PhD in history. Now it's been close to a decade doing history generally, close to be very precise, 12 years. And my PhD is again on the colonial bureaucratic apparatus and nationalism, talking about the ICS which you want to be, which is now IS, and how nationalism impacted it. So, throughout my academic journey from BA honors to MA to MPhil, I actually was the university topper, gold medalist throughout. And as I was doing it, as Aniket has pointed out, that I was for the past 6 years before I joined Byju's I was an assistant professor in Delhi University. I taught in Delhi University as an assistant professor. So my last appointment or the before I joined Byju's was the Hindu College, as he pointed out. And before that, I also taught in LSR, in Kamla Nehru, and in College of Vocational Studies, Satyavati Evening, multiple colleges of Delhi University. So therefore, I've been doing this for now close to teaching for close to 7 to 8 years. And over and above that, I've been having a relationship with history for the past decade or so. So, whilst knowing Portuguese language and being a modernist, because of the fact that I have this training in history, I've been given the task to teach you history in Byju's. And apart from being this, just recently I've also become an author for Pearson India, which is that I've just recently published a book on UGC NET. If you know what is UGC NET, which is basically the examination for assistant professorship, a history paper. That book I'll discuss with you more when we'll be in modern India morning batch or ancient India morning batch. That book does not pertain to world history, but we'll talk about that. But the basic point is you don't have to worry. The why am I telling you this? Because when I'm teaching you this, I'm a specialist of European, American, plus Chinese, Japanese, and Indian history. So what we are doing here is something which is much lower than what I've been doing. So at different points of time in throughout these 10 modules, I'll be modulating in the level which I'll be teaching according to the need of the examination. So this is me, and you don't have to worry about these things. I work, if you've been through with me previously, you will know I work through timelines, I work through summaries, And then there are 3 basic rules of being in class, which I will share with you. So if my background is clear, can we now start our discussion? Because a lot of you are still trickling in. Can we start our discussion? Yes. So there are 3 basic ground rules of the class. First ground rule is that I don't want you to make running notes, because a lot of you have this very bad habit, which is, it's a good habit in college and school but not here, which is that you don't look towards the screen, rather hear me, and whilst you are hearing me, you are making notes. I'm not asking you to do that, because I want your concentration towards me and towards the screen. Second is, from time to time, I will keep on asking you that, do we follow? Are you with me? Or are we understanding what we're doing? Only when I get a positive affirmation in the form of a yes in the comment section, when you write, yes, sir, I totally understand this topic, then only we'll move forward. And the third is, there's a certain pattern in which I teach. I will first give you the basic story. Then I'll give you the details out of the PPT. And then we'll go into the way we summarize everything. That is what you would know me from the CNA, how I teach CNA, the same way I teach history, which is, we try to understand the basics first, then the nitty-gritty, then the summary, and I'll bring everything together. This is a much smaller journey, 10 modules. When we do ancient, medieval, modern, or art and culture, this way of teaching comes together in a very well grilled way, or in a very oiled way in that regard. So there are 3 rules, and the 4th complementary rule would be, you can ask me to repeat. You should not sit there thinking I will not repeat. But what I want from you is discipline, which is that you come on time, because I know who joins at what time. If you've been there with me from the beginning and you are saying, sir, I don't understand, I'm happy to repeat multiple times. But you join 5 minutes before that point and then ask me to repeat, I know you joined 5 minutes before. So don't think I don't know you're late or not. I know if you're late or not. So in a morning batch, I expect little bit of concentration, and very simply, to be on time. By 9:30, we'll finish everything. I will not extend. There is no need to extend. We'll figure out our way of learning as we go on. If you accept the rules, or if you accept the regulations, we can begin our story for today. Yeah, that is 24 to 25 classes. Yes, Kishan. Okay. Done. Okay. Agreed. So you've now agreed. It's a gentleman's and it's an agreement between you and me that we are going to operate like this. Okay. Now let's talk about history generally. When we talk about history, there are 6 parts to history in the way we cover it for UPSC. See, there's ancient, there's medieval, there's modern, there's art and culture, there's world history, Alina, I'll tell you about the book, don't worry. The book which I've published is available on Amazon. It's called UGC Net History Paper 2. You'll find it there. Just Google it, you will get it. Thereafter, post for this discussion from world history, it is of no purpose to you. Now, these 6 things together make history. Now, till this year, there was a division. There was a very neat division. This was only prelims. These plus mains, and these 2 are only mains. Now, the anomaly which has occurred this time is that we've got in GS paper 1 questions from ancient and medieval intermixed, not basically medieval, because the Delhi Sultanate question which came for science and technology is basically an art and culture question. But with Vedic age and the ancient India development and geography question, there was a little bit of overlap. Now, this is a very standard thing which UPSC does, which is to basically send certain forms of googlies towards the students in the examination. But when we will cover ancient and medieval with you, when I will cover it with you, you will realize all of these questions were manageable with the level of knowledge which you get in the class. So that's a separate issue altogether. As of right now, ancient, medieval, modern art and culture, let's keep it aside because that is not part of our discussion right now. We rather are here. World history. Now, world history is basically a mains oriented topic. It's a mains oriented subject. And these 10 modules, which is 10 modules, which we are trying to understand through a mains level understanding. Now, what do you mean by mains level understanding? See, here you have to be factual plus conceptual because both type of questions are coming. Here you have to be factual plus conceptual, but you also need to have what we call as descriptive knowledge, which is that you have to write answers. That is why you need to have descriptive knowledge. And here you don't need to have factual knowledge but conceptual knowledge plus descriptive. Now, what do I mean by descriptive and conceptual? What I mean by descriptive and conceptual is that you need to understand the facts, but you don't have to learn them the way you would learn it for ancient and medieval. Here, if you understand the story, and main points, you will be able to write good answers also. And in this journey, as we go on, I'll keep on giving you questions for practice so that you understand how a question can be asked from this area itself. But the first thing which you need to understand is that world history is not prelims oriented. So I will be giving you a lot of facts, but learning them is not your task. Rather, understanding the story of, for example, the American Revolution is very, very important. So this is the first thing which you need to understand and identify, which is that history is not very, very monolithic or what we call as homogeneous. It is multiple aspects of different what we call as subjects, and therefore ancient, medieval, modern and art and culture have a different type of need, while world history has a different type of need. Do we understand this? Because then I want to move to the modules, the syllabus, and the million-dollar question which a lot of you are itching to ask, which is which book, what to read, what not to read. Because the problem with world history is this only. Okay, now let's talk about the syllabus, what UPSC has given us as the syllabus. When we talk about the syllabus, UPSC has done what it does best, which is to be as vague as possible, the vaguest as possible, which is, it says history of the world. This is GS paper 1, history of the world, including events from 18th century like industrial revolution, world wars, colonization, decolonization, redrawal of national boundaries, political philosophies like communism, capitalism, socialism, and their effects on society. Now, UPSC could not have made my task more difficult, which is to not give a starting point and not give a end point. They've just written randomly 18th century, but you can't teach 18th century without understanding certain concepts which existed beforehand. And they've randomly sprinkled very big events. So when it comes to GS paper 1, the second question which would be coming to your mind is, which is the utilitarian, what English taught us, which is how many questions come. Now there can be 0 to 2 questions. 0 to 2 questions means for between 2017 and 2019, UPSC was moody. 1 year they asked a question, then they didn't ask a question. Then they asked a question, then they didn't ask a question. 1 year they asked 2 questions. For the past 2 years, 3 years rather, they're asking one question consistently. And they've started to do one more thing, which is they started to mix world history with international relations or world history with modern India. This is the bigger issue which you will face as an aspirant, which is when UPSC starts to mix up things. So for the students who are thinking or who are sitting here, that is it worth it? Because that is a question which will come to your mind. The answer is yes. Can't leave world history because there are multiple channels, multiple sources, multiple seniors, multiple people you would know who will tell you, एक question आता है, छोड़ दो, what's the point? One question, leave it. But the problem is that world history is connected to international relations, is connected to modern India. Everything which happened in modern India is very intricately connected to what is happening in world history. And over and above that, with world history, you can understand IR better, current affairs better, the modern India, obviously, syllabus better. Over and above that, it helps you in essay and understanding the issues in the world and geopolitics better. So I know you've not asked me this question, but I'm answering you beforehand that you can't leave it because you have to understand it to understand your syllabus better. What is the difference between global history and world history? Both are the same thing, but global history is connected history. That's an academic terminology. World history is what UPSC uses. History of the world. Global history is same thing. It's a new way of now in 21st century talking about world, which is global history. But global histories are mostly connected histories of the world, which is this connection between our modern India and world history. You don't have to go into it. That's a totally academic word in that regard. So now that we understand that UPSC is not made my task very easy, let me tell you how we are going to cover what we are going to cover. See, there are total 10 modules. Today we will start with American Revolution. Thereafter, once we're done with American Revolution, we'll do French Revolution. Thereafter, a heavy but interesting topic, which is called unification of Germany and Italy. Thereafter, Industrial Revolution. These four are standalone topics. So, solution to the problem IR for modern history. Yes, Ilma. It gives you a very good understanding of modern India. It gives you a better understanding of geopolitics, so you can give better answers in international relations. Yes, true. Now, these four are standalone, basically four events which are connected to each other but are in themselves modules. Thereafter, by next week, we'll go into the connected modules, which is called Eastern Question and Road to First World War. Then we'll discuss First World War. Then we'll discuss Russian Revolution and all the ideologies here and ideologies. Then we'll discuss Road to Second World War. This is Second World War and Cold War. And last but not the least, 10th module is colonization, decolonization. This is again a standalone topic. These are connected modules. 5 to 9 are connected modules. Again, you don't have to learn this, but I'm trying to tell you that we will cover American Revolution, French Revolution. We start in 1774 as the first event, and we'll end by the disintegration of USSR by 1992, 1991, 1992. So American, French, unification of Germany, Italy, Industrial Revolution, then First World War, Second World War, Russian Revolution, ideologies, colonization, decolonization, Cold War politics. This is basically how we are going to cover it. Within this, you will cover all the events which are actually written here. We will discuss communism, we'll discuss capitalism, we'll discuss socialism, will effects on society, we'll try to understand redrawal of national boundaries, which is unification, Germany, Italy, colonization, decolonization, World War, Industrial Revolution. American Revolution and French Revolution important because it talks about events in 18th century. So are we clear with regards to? So I'll give you the timeline. Don't worry. I've not even started you on the chronological History, I will tell you. This basically is in chronology in itself, except for Industrial Revolution, which I will tell you. Don't worry. Multiple things. Enlightenment is 18th century. Enlightenment is not again part of GS, but we have to refer to it. Okay. Now, the question is, what is the book which you refer to? This is the question which comes to your mind. What do I need to refer to? Now you will find multiple types. 10th point is colonization, decolonization. We'll do Africa and we will do Indochina, which is Vietnam. That's our insurance policy, which we'll cover. So when you talk about books for world history, multiple people will talk about multiple things. But people will say, go and read Arjun Dev. That's an old NCERT. Then people talk about Norman law. But the problem with Arjun Dev and Norman law is that both start after First World War. And the issue with Arjun Dev first part is the most of the book is irrelevant. And thereafter, you have the 8th, what we call as 9th and 11th NCERT, new one, which has certain chapters. For example, American Revolution, it has a chapter on the Nazis, it has a chapter on socialism, and it has a chapter on Industrial Revolution. But again, multiple things are left. Some of you may have got the book which we used to send. That's a separate issue altogether. What I want to say is, there's no need for a book. PPTs are enough. This is what you want to hear. And in world history, I don't want you to rather go and roam around and read 6 books for a topic out of which you will get 1 to 2 questions. So very simply, PPTs are enough for world history. If you go through these 10 modules which I'm giving you, everything which I'm telling you in class and plus what is written in the PPT should be enough to write any answer in the examination. You want to go through the Byju's book or through the NCERT, that is totally your call, your commitment. I'm not making it mandatory. Try to understand this point. That if you want to read the NCERT, totally your call. Totally your call. However, if you just want to refer to the PPT plus the ARM and whatever we are doing in class, it is more than enough for you. This may not be true for ancient medieval art and culture and for modern India, but it is true for world history. So for the past 25 minutes, we've been basically creating the context. We've discussed the syllabus, we've discussed who I am, and we've also discussed the concept of what are the books which we need to refer to and what is our module discussion. So, Ruchi, doesn't matter. You have these PPTs. Once this class will be over, the annotated PPT will be generated. I am making notes for you. Don't worry about that. So, very simply, if you've been with me, you would know that PPTs for even modern India is enough. But trust the process. Trust the process, be it timelines, be it the concept of summaries, be it the questions, we will do it. What are other subjects? Ruchi will discuss that when we reach the other subjects. Right now, concentrate here. I want you to concentrate here. So if we are clear with regards to the first half an hour, I would like to now move towards the subject which we need to cover. Because till this point, we've just been creating the context. Yes? Is everybody clear with regards to the syllabus, what they have to refer to? Yes, no, have to be clear. Have to be more vocal. You have to be a part of this. It is important. Yes, okay. So I'm only asking you to write one yes from time to time, and that gives me clarity if it is making sense or not. Okay. So we are clear with regards to the syllabus, we are clear with regards to the books, and we are clear regards with the how we cover it. And the moral of the story is for anybody who's joined us late, first, trust the process. Second, don't worry. I've been doing this for quite a long time and at the academic level, at university level. So this is much lower than that. Third, the syllabus is vague. That is why we are going to do it in a certain way. And last but not the least, the PPTs are enough. Strategy, module by coverage, everything I will tell you once we reach there. Okay. This year we got some questions from modern India and mains. But yes, modern India is main specific. Okay. How to revise world history, I will tell you that. Don't worry. First, let's cover it. Sir, are you teaching NCERT also? Chetna, I'm much above, at certain points, I'm much above the NCERT. NCERT is for a person who does not have any guidance. NCERT as it is not written from a UPSC perspective. So don't worry about the NCERT here. What I'm teaching you is good enough to write any answer. As it is, you have to write 150 words or 250 words. If you know how to write, you will be able to write any answers within 150 to 250 words. Don't have to worry. This PPT, you will not, the content of this PPT is not even in Norman Law or multiple books. I'm teaching you out of my own experience and my own teaching. So don't worry about that. Yes, it is a blend of multiple books. Okay. Now, we start our discussion now. For anybody who's joined till this point, we are now starting our first module, which is called American Revolution. The introduction part is clear. You all have agreed to tell me from time to time if it is making sense or not, and you will basically tell me to repeat if you don't follow. But there will be multiple revisions in the class. Let us now how to go with revision. Tulsi, first learn something, then we'll talk about revision. I will tell you what to do with it. Don't worry. For history, I will tell you how to revise. Everything I will tell you. First, learn. Concentrate. No, let's not jump the gun. Patience. Patience and trust. On everything in the world is based on these two things. And I will promise you that by the time you come out of these 36 hours or 35 hours, you will have a better understanding of the West, of the Americans, of the British, of what happened in Europe, and generally how it is connected to our history in modern India. Because we tend to see modern India in isolation. It is not in isolation. Every event which happens in India had a very important world history context. Therefore, your modern India becomes better. Okay, now we start our discussion from this point forward. So at 6:31, we start our discussion. And our discussion is basically going to be about American Revolution. Now, the problem with teaching you American Revolution is UPSC wants me to say, for example, randomly say, so there were 13 colonies of the Americans. As you know, the British colonized the American continent, and therefore the American Revolution started in the British colonies of America. But the problem in that whole statement is that in that statement, I presumed 5 to 6 very important things. I presumed 5 to 6 very important things. That what is colonization? What is the concept of American continent? Was there something before in this American continent? What is this British colonization? Were the British the only one? This is the problem. If you go by any other form of video, any other form of resource, or any other form of way of teaching, there's a presumption that you understand what is this concept of New World. But I won't do that. Let's do one thing. Let's go through a certain process which happened in Europe. Though it is not part of your syllabus, it is basically optional level, but it will be important for your understanding and understanding a very important concept which developed in 1492. So let's try to do one thing. Let's not presume anything. Let's not presume anything. Let's start from scratch. Now, Kiran, we are starting now. Pay attention. From this point forward, pay attention. So if I pick up any book from Europe in 1400, a book written in 1400 from Europe, it will refer to 3 areas in the world. It will refer to what is called Old World, which is basically Europe. It will also refer to another continent, which is Africa. And then it will refer to a very big continent, which is called Orient. Orient would be India and China. Now, can anybody tell me what is the connection between these three continents? Why is that these three continents were so easily known to the Europeans? Very good, trade. But yes, Shashank, very good. They have, yes, Shashank, very good. They have a land connection. Basically, you can move between these continents with a certain amount of, not going into the high seas, but crossing certain amount of smaller seas or water bodies. These three are in a way land connected. Specifically, Europe and the Orient are having a silk route, as we know, and therefore, yes, they are colonies, but we are not talking about colonies, we're talking about 1400. We're talking about the fact that these three continents in a way have a land route connecting each other, and you don't have to go too far beyond into the water body to actually reach Africa also. So very simply, these three continents were known to the Europeans. This is a very Eurocentric approach we are taking. So they were known to the Europeans. But if the Europeans thought that this is the world, are they missing something? Are they missing something in this picture? What are they missing? What are they missing? Very good. They are missing one whole set of continents which we call as the Americas. North and South America. Now, North and South America, according to the Europeans, before 1492, never existed. Australia and all, don't worry, Palak. The point is that just next to Europe, across the Atlantic Ocean, there were the Americas. But for the Europeans, before 1492, there was nothing on the other side. And it is only after 1492 that a person called Christopher Columbus went across the Atlantic Ocean and came back. And they now named it the New World. Now, one of you asked a very good question. Shambhavi, why, sir? And that is why I'm trying to, and that is what we're trying to answer. Why is that the Europeans would never venture across the ocean to go and see to the what is beyond the Atlantic Ocean? And what changed in 1492, 1493 that the New World was discovered? Now, a very important point I want to discuss with you here is, if a European says that I am the Prime Minister of India, does it make me the Prime Minister of India? No. Same way, they call it the New World, but it wasn't something new. It was always there. There were multiple civilizations such as the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incas. But the basic point is, for the Europeans, it is a new world. They were the old world. This was the new world. Now, the question remains is, what changed in 15th century that allowed for the people to cross over the Atlantic Ocean? Some of you have already tried to answer this question, and the answer which you are giving is, for example, shipbuilding. Ottomans had blocked trade. Sure, fall of Constantinople, but that would affect India route, not America route. The question is, why did they not have the courage to go into the water? Very good, Abhishek. We not go into the water too far off, and that can only be explained if we go to 14th century Europe. Can we go to 14th century Europe? Can we sit in our time machine and go to this point, and I can then explain everything to you? A lot of you know what is the flat earth concept, but there's a much bigger story behind that. Let's try to understand it. Okay. Yes, they believed the earth was flat, but why did they believe the earth is flat is much more important. That's a what we call as response. That's a product. We need to understand the cause. Okay. Yes, the notion that the earth is flat is the concept. Yes. Due to churches, ocean, we are coming to that. Yes, you're right. Okay. Can we start our discussion with regards to 14th century Europe? Everybody is okay with this space. Everybody is following what we are doing. Yes? Okay. Now, one thing very, very important. What I am going to teach you now is basically Renaissance, Reformation, modern, what we call as rise of modern sciences, scientific revolution, and then what we call as age of discovery. All of this is basically out of your syllabus because this is not part of the 18th century events, but all of this is something which you need to understand, and you only need to understand the basics. So I'm not going to go into them in detail. I will only tell you how they're important to our story. Okay. So let's try to understand how 14th century, 13th century, 14th century Europe used to look like. And at this point of time, there used to be a system which you would have heard for sure in your life, which is called feudalism. This is the original form of feudalism, which is the fact that the society was divided in a certain way. You have the king at the apex, which is at the top. Thereafter, under the king, you have what are called knights or soldiers. Under the soldiers, you have landlords. From this topic, no mains question. Yes, only for understanding. Yes, Pala. Perfect. Yes, only for understanding. Sometimes you have to do that only for understanding. Mains question from Renaissance will not come in GS level. It can come in optional, not here. Okay. Landlords, or what we call as vassals. And then you have what we call as bonded labor, which we call as serfs. I will discuss what is Renaissance Hariom. Don't worry. Don't again jump the gun. Everything will be explained to you. Please be with me right now. This is how the society was divided: king, knight, landlord or vassal, and bonded labor. So basically, the society was hierarchical, and the king used to control the knights used to control the vassals, and the vassals used to control bonded labor. This is called a decentralized model of control, wherein the king does not control the people, he rather controls the soldiers control the labor, the landlords control the basic unit of labor, which is serfs. But there's also one more actor which is not part of this structure but is very, very important, which is the church, and which we call as the Pope. So you know that the Pope, or the clergy, as a lot of you pointed out, very good, clergy. The Pope basically is the religious head of all Christians in Europe as of right now. And clergy is basically church bureaucracy. So you would know, for example, bishop, archbishop, what we call as dukes, for example, priest. Priest is the lowest. Priest, bishop, archbishop, grand duke, thereafter pope. Pope is the highest position. Basically, the church also has positions through which you go up. For example, again, cardinal. So you have priest, cardinal, bishop, archbishop, pope. So we have multiple positions. Don't have to learn it. But the point is, the church is a very important institution at this point of time. And the beauty of the church at this point of time was it had direct control over the king. And more than that, the church very decisively controlled knowledge system, society, and ideas about our surrounding. See, very simply, the church controls everything. When will you get up? When will you sleep? Can you marry? Can you not marry? Can the king marry? Can the king not marry? Very simply, the king was not independent. The church had a lot of control over the king, and therefore the king always used to listen to the pope in that regard. And the church controlled knowledge system means that education was controlled by the church. Here, the king should not be called a puppet, but he still is a puppet in the hands of the church for sure. The point is that the church, though it is not part of the state, still controls a lot of smaller details of day-to-day living. But for you and me and for our discussion right now, it controlled education. It controlled education. So you tell me that if the church says that the earth is a cylinder, and if I say no, the earth is flat, will the church allow my understanding to exist? No. No. Very simply, the church will always try to propagate and control its own understanding. And if I disagree with the church, I will be either burnt alive or will be called a person who has challenged the authority of the divine Lord. So it's blasphemy that I have basically challenged the Lord, the Savior, God, and therefore I should be killed. So now the point is, the question which came to your mind and my mind also, why is that the church, or why is that the Europeans were not very comfortable going too far into the sea or any water body, was because the church at this point of time propagated what is called the flat earth concept. So according to the church, in 14th-15th century, the earth was not a geoid or a sphere. Rather, it was a flat earth. And according to them, the earth was basically surrounded by a dome in which the moon and the sun used to go up and down. And this is 13th, 14th century Europe. And imagine how dumb these Europeans could be, that we had Bhaskara, we had Aryabhatta, we had multiple astrologers telling us they are basically calculating the circumference of the earth, the distance to the sun. And these dumbfounded Europeans believed that the earth was flat. But unfortunately, because we came under the domination of these dumbfounded Europeans, that we had to actually learn these things again from their perspective. So according to the church, if you go too far out into the ocean, you will fall off the edge of the earth. How did they come up with this concept? Because that is the only thing which the church could understand. Ilma, you stand on the road. Does the earth seem for, or does the earth look like a sphere to you? When I'm standing, or when you are sitting on the ground right now, does it actually turn out to be the curvature of the earth is visible to you? Yes or no? Can you see the curvature of the earth sitting? No. For the church, a priest sat and said, "Seedha hai, flat." So everything is flat. So these people thought that the earth was flat. And now if I will say no, the earth is not flat, I'll be burnt. So very simply, 13th, 14th century Europe, people are scared to go into the ocean too much. And the simple straightforward point is, let's quantify the power of the church. The church's power at this point of time was close to 100% over education and over the knowledge system. Now, one of you asked me, I think Shambhavi asked me this question, why is that, sir, nobody wanted to go too much into the ocean? And why is that it is only in 15th century that things started to change? But to answer that question, do you understand why they did not have the courage to go across the ocean? This is the first point you need to understand. Why European gave monopoly to Pope Kishan? It's not like that. Religion is how it dominates. You will see there will be changes in Europe, but at this point in time, religion dominates because religion is the way it understands power and how people understand society. So they could fall off the edge of the earth. Sure, yes. So first things first, why there was no exploration before the events which I am going to discuss with you. Do we understand that? Was in Pope, it was hierarchical, somebody appointed him. Tulsi, he's appointed from within, but is of no purpose to you, that discussion. He's appointed from within. It's not hierarchical, they're elected from within. Okay, yes. Religion dominated the past. Till today, religion dominates you. Very simply, religion dominates till today. Doesn't religion dominate you today? Maybe not in urban areas, in rural areas, it still dominates. So religion dominates is a standard thing. Okay. Okay. Henry the Navigator will come to, don't worry about that. You're moving forward in the story. Church controls mind. Okay, now 14th century Europe, anybody has any issue. What is going to happen, I'm going to tell you. Anybody has any issue in church's authority. How does the church come through? Where does it come from? That is called rise of mod west. That is of no purpose to you. We're not going to the story of dark ages. That is European history, proper European history. This is what you need to know. That is it. I'm not going to give you unnecessary information. I'm not a person who wastes time of the students. Every minute is important. Can we discuss what changes in Europe which allows for things to change in the people? Okay, good. Now, 14th century Europe looks like this. King, knight, vassal, serf. Church has too much power. It controls. Hariom asked the question. The church has too much power. It controls society, knowledge, and ideas. And very simply, the church believes that the earth is flat, so people would not explore too much. And the kings are controlled very socially, maybe not politically, but socially, through their rituals, and their way of living was controlled by the church. Okay. Difference between church and clergy. Church is the institution, clergy is the institution's bureaucracy. Okay. If, as per Pope, river water used to fall from the edge. Again, Hardik, as you know, this actually makes no sense. Flat earth theory doesn't make sense. Your logic is totally correct. But I challenge you to go and say to the Pope that you are dumb and that the river water will fall off the edge of the earth. You will most probably be killed in saying this, because the church will never challenge its own authority. Logic is something which does not exist as of right now. Okay. Now there will be a set of changes which will come out of this system, and everything which I'm going to discuss with you is only for context and understanding. Now please try to understand, there will be a chain of events which will take away the power of the church, and that will allow for something called the scientific revolution to happen. But in order to understand that, let's try to understand the first process which basically created this chain reaction. Now, as a king, if the priest tells me sit up, stand, go, come back, cannot marry, cannot divorce, cannot do this, cannot do that. If I'm a king, would I feel very happy that a pope or a king or a priest is telling me to do everything? No, it is frustrating. It is literally frustrating. And this is basically what happens in Europe also. In the early 15th or late 14th century, what will happen is that the kings will start to get frustrated. The kings get frustrated. And what they will basically do is that they will start to appropriate power, or what we call as consolidate power. The kings will start to consolidate power, and they will remove church's influence over them and consolidate power. And these kings were very aptly known as absolutist kings, or what we call as absolutist monarchies. Absolutist means that they started to take away power from the church and started to appropriate power in themselves, and therefore they had absolute power. So mostly these are called absolutist monarchies or absolutist monarchs. They were extremely frustrated by the way the king or the king was controlled by the church, or how the church used to interfere. So if I have to argue that the church's influence over the king went away, so the power of the church will go up or down from 100%. Will it go up or down? It will go down. So if our story started at 100%, and I'm just trying to quantify it for your understanding, by this action in which feudalistic system started to decline and the king started to appropriate power, what we see is that the church's authority, this is visible, church's authority is now 80%. Let's presume that it is minus 20%. This event, the decline of feudalism, was minus 20% for church's authority. Now this 20% opening will allow something very interesting. Everybody's following me till this point. Any of the finer details are not important. Decline these, that, not important. When I'm not telling you something, I'm not telling it to you for a very specific reason. So be with me, follow what I'm telling you. Feudal system declines because of the king's frustration. There are multiple issues which have developed within feudalism itself. The king starts to appropriate power. With the rise of absolutist monarchies, feudalism will start to decline and church's authority will be reduced. There's much bigger part of a story which I'm not telling you. Crusades has nothing to do with this. That's a religious war that has nothing to do with this. Very straightforward. The church's authority has gone from 100 to 80%. Now the king doesn't really listen to the church. Okay. Now, if you are from PSI or optional, or sociology optional, or history optional, or if you know political theory, there were certain thinkers in Europe which were comparable to, for example, Aryabhatta, to Varamira, to Bhaskara. Can you give me their names? For example, to Kautilya. They are very important Indian thinkers, and they're in the ancient and early medieval period. Yes, Machiavelli, Plato, Socrates, not Voltaire, Aristotle, very good. Ptolemy, very good. Strabo, not Montesquieu, that's an Enlightenment thinker. Not Kant, Rousseau, again later. As of right now, we're basically talking about what are called Greek scholars. We have Plato, we have Socrates, we have, for example, Aristotle, we have Machiavelli. These are very, very Herodotus, sure, why not? These are very, very important Greek thinkers. Now, if I remember correctly, and if you have any idea of it, I think the Greeks also argued that the earth was round, that they were basically picking up from a lot of things which the Indian scholars were talking about. And in a way, the Greek and the Roman scholars had a lot of understanding of the earth, which was quite nuanced vis-a-vis what the church knew. And if that is the case, then what happened? See, what happened was that with the rise of Christianity, all this literature, Aristotle, Plato, all this Greek literature was kept aside and made hidden by the church. So these popes and these priests could dominate the understanding of Europe, and this 20% opening in the church's authority being taken away by the absolutist kings allowed for a very important, very, very important event, which is called the Renaissance. Bible itself didn't say that the earth is flat. Sure, Dhanya, that is true. But the priest who was dumb enough to read the Bible and then say it is flat, it is not the Bible which is the problem. It is the intermediary. It is always the intermediary. A lot of our scriptures never talked about sati, but we still had sati. Sati had no scriptural concept, but they still followed it. So it is always the religious intermediary who's the problem rather than the sacred book. So don't worry about that. We will discuss it when we'll talk about ancient and modern India. Don't worry about these things. Yes, it is not the canonical book. It is rather the problem. But the Bible does talk about what we call as the age of creation. It does not talk about evolution. But that is, I'm not here to teach you theology. I'm not here to teach you religion. I'm here to teach you history. Now, the point is the opening up of 20% of the way the church controlled society allowed for a very important event, which is called Renaissance. Yes, Madhur, it is totally a part of it. But UPSC, you have to become an IS officer, not a theologian. So I am here to make you an IS officer. It is not Astha channel that I am going to discuss religion with you here. So separate issue altogether. Sure, a lot of things, a lot of part of things. Understand this point. Be focused on what you want to do. So when I teach science and when I will teach you, for example, 6 schools of philosophy, we will not try to apply it on us. You are here to become a UPSC aspirant, not a constitutional lawyer, not an economist, not a historian, and not a theologian. You are here to become an IS officer. That is what my task is to. I will do it. Enlightenment is in my 18th century. After this, not before it. So always be clear of what you want to do. Because I know when religion, everybody is going to become emotional. Don't worry. Ancient medieval, I will teach you. Don't worry. Okay. As it is, this is not your own history. I really don't care about the Europeans too much. So let's talk about them generally. Now, Renaissance. When we talk about the Renaissance, the word Renaissance means rebirth or resurgence. See, the Renaissance is not a political movement. It is a cultural movement. Now, what happened was that because of the church's authority going away a little bit, in the Italian states, which is modern day Italy, what happened was that the people started to rediscover this Greek philosophy, this Greek knowledge, and there was a revival of Greek knowledge. Now, the Renaissance, which happened in Europe, from where have you heard the word Renaissance previously? Before world history, where have you heard the word Renaissance? Have you heard the word Renaissance before it? Yes, modern India. In what context? Very good. Socialist reform movement. The Indian Renaissance, Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Standard. Now, very simple. The word that Indian Renaissance, the original word is this, which is Renaissance. Renaissance means rebirth, resurgence, and it is a resurgence of Greek knowledge which was hidden by the church. Now, if I was standing in, for example, 1450, 1500, the church used to argue. Again, all of this is outside your syllabus. I'm coming till a point from which I will teach you and I will tell you from where it is relevant for the examination. Now, 1450, 1450, 1500, if I asked a priest who is important, the answer that the priest will give is only God is important. Man has no power. Man, unfortunately, women are ignored here automatically, but man has no power. We as humans are powerless. Divine intervention and divine power is everything. This is called scholasticism. This is called scholasticism. Scholasticism is a concept of education in which theology is very, very important, which is the study of religions. Study of religions. And according to a priest, according to the Pope, you and me have no power. Everything God. So when it came to art, when it came to architecture, when it came to literature, everything used to talk about God too much. Too much. Divine, 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 divine. Now the Renaissance changed this. The Renaissance changed this because what the Renaissance did was that the Renaissance revived Greek knowledge, and the Greek knowledge said, no, man also has power. We as human beings have the power to change nature. We as human beings have the power to think. And therefore, the Renaissance was a very important moment in European history because it created a new understanding which is called humanism and individualism. See, when you will go, when you choose your streams in school, they ask you, do you want to be commerce? Do you want to be science? Or you want to take arts or humanities? The word humanities comes from this word, humanities. One second. Story of humans, humanities. See, humanism is a new concept which developed in Europe, which argued that you and me are important, that an individual is important, and the overemphasis on God was taken away. The overemphasis on God was taken away. And very simply, now they started to teach vis-a-vis scholasticism, humanities, history, political science, sociology, anthropology. What are these? These are the stories or the study of humans. History, the study of your past. What we call as political science is study of polity, again created by humans. Sociology, study of society. Anthropology, study of cultures and tribes. Therefore, what the Renaissance does is that it creates humanism and individualism has two new ideas. And you already know the name of a very important humanist who changed the influence on art, literature, and architecture. And his name is Leonardo da Vinci. Da Vinci was actually a very important humanist. Da Vinci actually started to now paint humans. In architecture, humans started to become very, very important. Individuals became important. Now, the portraits, the architecture all became human centric, or you would have seen a very iconic painting in which man is, and there's a moment in which you see the hand of God and man meeting. It's a very iconic painting you would have seen where a man is very simply lying down and is towards, or his hand is towards the sky, and from there God is also going down and trying to touch the hand of the human. That man and God imagery is very important because it humanizes God also. And therefore Da Vinci, Michelangelo became very, very important personalities who allowed for humanism to spread. So now there is a new ideology which has come up, which is called humanism and individualism. Now, if again we quantify the value of the church in society, again with the Renaissance, the power of the church will go up or down. I will bring everything together. Don't worry. You will understand why am I doing this. Again, it will go down. Very beautiful. Very, very good. Very simply, because now the Greek knowledge has come through, these things will challenge the church. And if I again had to quantify, let's take it as a moment in minus 20%. And this is at 60% now. The power of the church is now at 60%. So it lost 20% because of decline of feudalism, and it has again lost 20% because of the Renaissance. So till this point, what I've done is very simply, I'm repeating myself. What I've done is that I've taught you what we call as feudalism. In feudalism, there is 100% control of the church over society, and the church has all the power it has. Thereafter, decline of feudalism happens because of absolutist monarchies. The kings start to become frustrated, and the church's authority becomes 80%. And with the decline of feudalism, what happens is there's a space for the revivalism of Greek knowledge, which we call as the Renaissance. And the Renaissance again takes another 20% out of it, and we get 60% control of the church. And very simply, why is Renaissance important? Two very important concepts. Renaissance introduces, because of Greek knowledge, humanism and what we call as individualism. And these two concepts are groundbreaking because they start to act and argue that man and men are important. Divine power is not everything. Does anybody have any issue till this point? If yes, I'll repeat this whole process again. If no, we can move forward. Yes or no? No problem? As it is, you don't have to learn this. You only have to understand. Okay. No problem. Clearly understood. Nothing better. Great. Okay. Now the next event, which happens, how Greek text influencing, because Greek text had an understanding which was even before the church existed, which talked about man being important. So when you get new texts which talk about something which was before the prevailing Christian understanding, it will be influential. Understand this point. These are things which are happening parallel to each other. I'm simplifying it for you in that sense. Much nuanced cultural movement, but I'm giving you the basic gist out of it. Renaissance means rebirth, or what we call as resurgence. It's a Italian word. Okay. Now, the next event which happened after the Renaissance was a major event which we call as the Reformation. Now, to very simply put it, what the Reformation is basically is the Bhakti movement of Christianity. If you understand this, good enough, but I'll elaborate it for you. Bhakti movement means that Christianity never remained the same after Reformation. Because whilst this was an outside force which changed it, this was again an outside force which changed it. Reformation happened from within. And let's try to understand what is then Reformation. What is then Reformation? Now, imagine that we are living in again 13th, 14th century Europe. And the problem is that from the priest to the cardinal to the bishop to the archbishop to the pope, this bureaucracy is very elaborate. It's extremely elaborate. But what is very interesting about this is that the upper parts of the clergy, the upper parts of the clergy, they are extremely wealthy. So the whole Vatican City has been made, used to drink in gold and silver, enjoyed so much wealth, they had no idea what to do. So they were only making sculptures of God. Pope, archbishop, bishop, extremely wealthy. The church collects a tax, so it has a lot of power in its hand. On the other hand, the priests were in poverty. They were finding it very difficult to make ends meet. So whilst the upper clergy, the upper part was very, very wealthy, this is called the corruption within the church. This is called the corruption within the church. But there was one practice which was extremely shady within the papacy, or you want to call it within the clergy or within Christianity at this point of time. And it's called the sale of indulgences. And I'll give you a very simple example and you will automatically understand what it is. So I am a person who somehow killed a person. I murdered 3 people. So now I go to the church, I go to the priest, and I say to the priest, I have sinned. I have killed 3 people. 3 people have been killed. Madhur, I'm coming to what is Reformation. I'm making the context. First context is corruption within the church, which is extremely wealthy pope, archbishop, bishop, but at the lower levels, they are not very, very wealthy. Second is a major issue which is existing within the church, which is called the sale of indulgence. Try to understand what it is, what I'm explaining to you. So I have killed 3 people, and now I go to my priest and confess, I have killed 3 people. I have sinned. I want to do something about it. So like an insurance agent, the priest will say, what if I tell you that there is a certificate which you can buy, which will kill or which will very simply wash off all your sin? And the person says, sure. He says 10,000 francs, for example. For 10,000 francs, I will give you a certificate that God himself forgave you. This is called sale of indulgence. Very simply, if I sin, I go to the church takes some money, they write a certificate and say, sab mast hai, go, sin again, kill 3 more people, come back, we will give you another certificate. Very simply, this is called a very, 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 very corrupt practice of the church, wherein they were basically selling divine grace. That the grace of God, that the what we call as benevolence of God can be bought. So there is no justice, there's nothing. It's some basically your insurance policy. Okay, you've done something. Okay, I'll write a certificate. Give me some money. I'll write a certificate. This is how the church used to actually gain money also. There was a lot of money which was coming from the sale of indulgences. So sale of indulgence is nothing but a certificate of indulgence. If you have sinned, you can wash off all your sins by just buying a certificate. Nobody really has a problem in understanding this. It's a very simple, straightforward concept. Church gives you a certificate which says, no, you cannot be prosecuted because this person has paid us, and God himself has said, he came to us, called me and said, isko chhod do, this person should be left. He's given that 10,000 francs. So, no issue. Now, the point was that there was a person in the German states who started to hate this. Were people dumb to believe? Sure, why not? Why not? Europeans are not very smart. You will realize by the end of this discussion, they're not very smart. Don't worry. Americans are even more dumber than Europeans. Not very smart. Don't expect too much from them. So German states, there was a person called Martin Luther. And please, his name is Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King Jr. is a different person. That's a black activist from America. So Martin Luther. Now, Martin Luther, he was frustrated by the practices of the church. That he was very simply frustrated by the sale of indulgence. He was frustrated by the poverty of the priests. The money which the sale of indulgence used to come used to go to the archbishop, bishop level. So very simply, Martin Luther was extremely frustrated by the church itself. He's a priest himself. And very simply, in a major moment of his frustration, he will write what is called the 95 thesis or thesis, and he will go and nail it on the wall of his own church. And basically, these were 95 grievances which he had against the church. Now, why Martin Luther is important? Because he is the one who protested. And because he protested, the church, because of the Reformation, will split up into two. One is called the Catholic Church. This is your original Orthodox Church who used to sell the sale of indulgences. Whilst on the other hand, you will have what are called the Protestants. Protestants are basically Martin Luther. In France, there was a person called Calvin. Across Europe, there will be multiple priests who will protest, and they will create a new type of Christianity. They are not outside Christianity, new type of Christianity, which did not very simply base its understanding on this sale of indulgence or very bad type of understanding. Rather, they argued that working is important. Work ethic is very, very important. But the most important point was Protestant churches started to get influenced by humanism. So whilst in the Catholic Sunday school, they used to teach scholasticism, God is everything, God is everything, God is everything. The Protestant churches used to teach humans are everything. And humanism, which was developing since the Renaissance period, now started to get connected within the Protestant religion. Now, there is much bigger story to Protestantism, to Martin Luther. But for our purpose, the Reformation, priest is at the grassroots level, Pope is the leader of all Christians. For our purpose, The Reformation is single-handedly the biggest blow to the church. And here, close to 50 to 40% of the church's authority goes away. And if you remember, I started the story like this, that if we had 100% control under feudalism, we came to 80% because of the decline of feudalism. We came to 60% because of Renaissance. It is the Reformation which basically was the biggest blow to Christianity, because it split Christianity into two. Till today, there are two types of churches which you would have seen. It would say Catholic Church, and it would say, for example, Baptist Church, some other type of church that is basically a Protestant church. Protestantism is a practice which exists within Christianity. They accept the same Pope, but they don't have the same practices. That is why I call it the Bhakti movement of Christianity. Bhakti movement forever changed Hinduism. Sufi movement forever changed Islam. Same way Protestantism was a product of Reformation changing Christianity. But for you and me, why is it important? Because it takes away a major chunk of the power. Yes, there are two types of priests now. You see, there are two types of churches today. There are basically three types of churches today. One I will introduce to you later. One is called Eastern Orthodox Church. That is the Russian church. Within Roman Catholic Church, there's one called Roman Catholic. That is the original Orthodox, the one which you see as the concept of sale of indulgence. And you will have a new Protestant church coming up with a new type of understanding with humanistic influences. So very simply, the way they interpret the Bible is different. That's the only thing. The Bible remains the same, the Pope remains the same, everything remains the same. The simple straightforward point is Reformation, it's not called Lutheran Church, it's called Protestant Church, because they're protesting, they call Lutheranism or Protestantism. So Protestant is a bigger word used for Calvins, Protestants, Zegots, multiples are there, but you don't have to remember them. Anglican in England, the German states, you have Luther. In France, you have Calvin. In the Netherlands, Denmark sector, we have called Zegots. Totally different concept. Don't have to do that. The simple straightforward point is, for our purpose and understanding, Luther initiated the Reformation, which in turn led to the power of the church coming to 20 to 10%. Till this point, are we following it? Yes, Weber argues that the Protestant ethic was the capitalist ethic, because Protestantism argued about working for your livelihood, not to sit for divine intervention. Are we all clear till this point? Yes, one says God is supreme, the other one says God is supreme, but man is also important. Everybody who is here has to say yes or no. You have to tell me, are we clear with regards to this understanding? Because now comes the most important discussion. Then I will take a break and we'll come back. Okay. Yes, sir. Clear, sir. Very good, sir. Okay. Now, because of the church authority being at 30 or 20%, this created the context for the next set of events which happened in Europe. And the first most important event is called the Scientific Revolution, which started with the discovery or the development because of three very important people: Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler. See, Copernicus was the first one, in a way, to argue that the earth was not flat, but the earth was a round sphere. He is also the one, again, don't have to learn this, he is also the one who introduced the concept of what we call as the heliocentric view of Earth. The heliocentric view of Earth is that the Earth is not the center of the universe, but the sun is the center of the universe, and Earth is one more object which, or celestial body, which goes around the sun. Copernicus proposed it. Kepler added to this story by arguing about orbits and basically calculating the distance, revolution, rotation of the Earth. But the most important personality who proved it and later was also prosecuted by the church also to some level was Galileo. Galileo was the one who developed the telescope. And the telescope proved the theory of Copernicus and Kepler. I'll tell you how. See, what Galileo did was that he found a star in the sky. Through his telescope, he noted the position of the star A. Now, according to the church, if I go after 6 months and look towards the sky, I will find this object A at where it is, or it will change, according to the church. It will remain the same. However, what happened was that Galileo showed that because the Earth is moving relative to the sun and to itself, he found the star moved to point B, which basically proves the rotation of the revolution of the Earth around the sun. Now, Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler basically created or paved the way for the floodgates to open. They were prosecuted by the church, but they allowed the floodgates to open for multiple reasons. For example, people used to think that our body is magic. How does our body work? We don't know. But then came Harvey. He argued that no, there is a heart inside. He was the one who developed the blood pressure concept. Thereafter, there were multiple tests which were done on humans to show that there is an anatomy. There is a way. Yes, William Harvey, blood circulation. There is a way this body works. There are muscles. There are lungs through which we breathe. There's blood circulation to the heart. But the one who is seen as the father of modern sciences is a person who troubles a lot of you till today as engineers, or has troubled you in school, is Newton. Newton changed everything. Newton changed everything for a very simple reason. He changed everything for a simple reason because he argued that it is not God which intervenes in everything. It is not divine law which decides everything. It is rather natural law which does it, and his 3 laws. His 3 laws, which is that if a body is in rest, it will want to be in rest. If a body is in motion, it will remain in motion, which is basically moment of inertia. And is the most important, which is every action has equal opposite reaction. And what Newton proved was that everything had a logic behind it. Everything had a reason behind it. And with this, the church's authority more or less became zero over the knowledge system, and humanities and modern sciences now started to dominate. And with the rise of modern sciences came new navigation tools. And there were 2 very important tools which were developed based on modern sciences, which is the compass and the magnetic needle. Can anybody tell me? Compass, we know it shows north, south, east, west. What does the magnetic needle show you? Any idea? Magnetic needle, what does it show you? Very good, Shreyank. No, not direction. Not north, south. not North Pole, South Pole. It does not show direction. Very good, Priyanka. Very good, Mechri. Yes, it is the magnetic field of the Earth. But by using that, what will it tell you? Magnetic needle tells you latitude. Are you in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere? See, magnetic needle aligns itself with the magnetism of the Earth. So it will change its angle according to the latitude. So they were able to calculate that if it is at the pole, it will be totally flat, and then if you are at the what we call as equator, it will be extreme fully straight. So the angle will tell you which latitude you are, and it will become totally other way if you are in the southern hemisphere. The dip, as it is called. Yes. Now the simple straightforward point is, now we come to the fundamental question, and herein I'll give you a break also, is that I asked you a question in the beginning, that why is that in 1492 people had the courage to cross the Atlantic, and the reason was that by 1492 the Renaissance, the Reformation, the scientific revolution, and rise of modern sciences had allowed for the navigators, the explorers, and the people to have the courage to trust this science and venture into the sea. What I'm trying to argue for the past close to an hour is that don't take Christopher Columbus for granted. Don't take Vasco da Gama for granted. Don't take Bartholomew Diaz for granted. Diaz reached till Cape of Good Hope. The 1498 and 1499 and 1500 exploration of reaching India was also part of this larger project. But when Christopher Columbus actually ventured out to look for India, he actually by mistake crossed the Atlantic Ocean. He wanted to go something like this, but he wasn't able to. Rather, he went across the Atlantic, reached the Caribbean islands. He did not reach Americas, he reached the Caribbean islands. He reached there. He thought he had reached India. That is why the original inhabitants of these islands are called Red Indians. He said, India to lag raha hai, but their little bit complexion is a little bit too dark, and that is why it's called Red Indians. He thought it is India, but they are a little bit darker, little bit more reddish, so Red Indians. The simple straightforward point is the courage to cross the Atlantic came through this. The person, again, do not learn this table, but the person after which the whole American subcontinent or subcontinent is named after is a person called Amerigo Vespucci. Amerigo Vespucci, Amerigo America. He was the one who actually reached Brazil. He was the one who actually reached North America. And the one person who changed modern sciences and navigation for everyone was this person called Ferdinand Magellan. Magellan was the one who had the courage to go and circumvent the earth. He started in Portugal and reached back in Portugal and proved to everyone that the earth was round. Now, I will give you a break here. I'll come back to this point again. But till this point, did it make sense that how everything what I've taught you is related to each other? I'll give you a summary of this and then we'll move forward. If I have your permission, I want to give you a break here. Yes? Now do you get it? Why for the past 1 hour I've been talking about Renaissance, Reformation. All of these events are connected to each other because they take away the power of the church, which allows for these travelers to go across the Atlantic. They had the courage to do it. Previously, they did not. So let's take a break here. It is what, 7:38. We will come back at 7:50. 12 minutes I'm giving you. 10 minutes I give you, but 2 minutes I'm giving it to you more. At 7:50, when we come back, we take this story forward. And from this point forward, the discussion becomes important for the examination. So I'll see you at 7:50. Let's try to summarize till this point. Okay. So let's try to summarize till this point. So we started our discussion close to 2 hours back, and the discussion was basically based on reaching to a point, and that point was very straightforward. Yes, you can argue that. Yes, Ilma, very good. So when we talk about 13th, 14th century Europe, in their understanding, again, I'm repeating everything. Please try to understand this. In 13th, 14th century Europe, there was only an understanding of the old world, India and China, which is Orient and Africa. For them, nothing existed beyond the Atlantic. And the reason for that was because of the church's domination over knowledge and over education. Now, the point was that this led to the flat earth concept, which in turn meant that people did not actually go beyond a certain point in the oceans, thinking that they will fall off the edge of the earth itself. Thereafter, with the rise of absolutist monarchies, this was the first blow to the church, with close to 20% reduction in power. And this was because the kings became more and more frustrated by the way the church was controlling everything, specifically polity. Once absolutism came through, it allowed for the 20% reduction in church's power, and that in turn led to what we call as the Renaissance, which is the revivalism of Greek knowledge, which led to two very important consequences, which is called humanism and individualism. And these two again reduced the power by 20% because they started to argue that man is important, not just divine intervention or God. Thereafter, the Renaissance led way for the Reformations or the Reformation. And the Reformation was the most important event which could ever happen from within the Christian fold itself, because this will lead to Protestantism, and this will further reduce the power by close to 40 to 50%, because this was the biggest blow which the church could get, because Protestant churches were actually based on humanistic thought. If before it called blasphemy, he burnt alive, why people couldn't do it same? Kishan, think, if a king says that I want to remove the church's authority, will does the church is the church so dumb that it will burn the king also? There's a point till which you can assert power. The king cannot be burnt alive by the church because they did not understand to the church. Now, this all of this will create the context for the next set of things to happen, which is the scientific revolution, and with that the modern sciences, which in turn led to age of discovery. And in that age of discovery, finally in 1492, America was found. They called it the New World. By 1498, they had a route to India. And by 1500, exploration became very common. So, as one of you said, the New World discovery in 1492 was part of a larger process or chain reaction which happened in Europe since the 15th century itself. Now, does anybody have any issue in this? Because then I want to move our attention away from all of this. As I said, you don't have to remember the names of these explorers, but now do you get it? See, I could have easily not taught you what I've taught you for the past 2 hours. 1.5 hours, most of the teachers presume, most of the people don't care, but I believe that you should understand it because that is your right as a student to know about world history. So very simply, the concept of the new world is not a chance discovery. It is because of certain processes which started in Europe, which allowed for it to happen. Now I want to shift our attention away from this part, which is irrelevant for the examination, but important for your understanding, to the other part. Can I do that? Because from this point forward, now we go into the questions which we have to deal with the examination. They had not seen Indians. How they can see red Indians? Madhur, they had seen Indians. The land route was there previously. Indian travelers used to go till Europe. So it's not that they had not seen Indians. Okay. Their only understanding was of Indians only. Everybody has to say yes. A lot of you are holding back. Yes. Okay. Now see that when it comes to the concept of the new world, now I need to introduce a word to you which is called colonization. Now colonization, when I will teach you this in the last module, because colonization decolonization is last module, but I have to in a way explain it to you here, because this is the way the whole syllabus is actually one full circle. See, colonization is the process of direct control over a territory or country other than oneself or own country. And in this, you would have heard for sure two types of words: mother country and colony. The mother country dominates and rules the colony. Now, very simply, what is the difference between colonization and imperialism? Amrit, I have to discuss this with you, but in the end, imperialism is the first stage of colonialism, but that's a separate issue altogether. Wait for the last module, I will discuss it with you. Right now, just colonization. These are two different things. Imperialism first stage, second stage is colonialism. Now, mother country dominates the colony or rules the colony, and there can be different motivations. There can be different motivations. It could be control, it could be exploitation. Now 1492 is seen as the genesis of colonization of the world. Why? Because very simply, now the Europeans did not fear the seas. So the two countries which became extremely obsessed with the concept of colonization or exploration were the two countries in the Iberian Peninsula, which is Portugal and Spain. Portugal and Spain. Now, for the same reason, the most of, except for this part, which was with the Portuguese, which is basically Brazil, the rest of South America was with Spain. On the other hand, in the northern sector, it was a little bit more complicated. All of this was Spain, whilst in modern day Canada, you had the French. The English were very late to the party. The English were very, very late to the party. Very late to the party. Before they could actually do anything, Portugal and Spain had already captured most of America because they were ready to fund the explorers to go around and check out these new worlds. Now the question would be that yes, this will remain with them for a very long time. The question would be, what is the motive of Spain and Portugal? And herein come what are called the 3 Gs: glory, God, gold. Glory, God, gold. Which is that first was glory. That I am not just the ruler of old world, I am also the ruler of new world. And that is why you would have seen that most of the names of the American sectors, specifically in the British American sectors, are nothing but adding new to the old areas. For example, New England, New Jersey, New Delaware. These are nothing but the word New York. These are nothing but word adding new to the areas which already existed. But for the Spanish and the Portuguese, it was basically that I am the ruler of both worlds, new world and old world. Nothing was new about this world, but according to them it was. But herein comes the first story of hypocrisy. And the first story of hypocrisy, do you know what is hypocrisy? I hope. Hypocrite. What is hypocrisy? Yes. Just to refresh your memory, a hypocrite is, for example, what a dogla, but see, the hypocrite basically is a person that I give you a lecture 1.5 hours lecture on not eating ice cream, and the first thing which I do as soon as the lecture is over is eat ice cream. This is called a hypocrite. This is being called a hypocrite. That I have been lecturing you, don't eat ice cream, this is bad, that is bad. As soon as that lecture is over, I bring in ice cream and eat it in front of you. This is called being a hypocrite. Now I'll show you the hypocrisy of the church. See, the Portuguese and the Spanish kings actually had a major impetus in exploration because of this God, church. See, the Catholic Church had already started to lose ground in Europe. So the same church which used to say, do not go into the ocean, now started to fund travelers so that they could spend they could send Jesuits. And one of these Jesuit also reached India. Can you tell me a name of a Jesuit who reached India? Come on, you know it. Yes, Francois Xavier. The concept of a Jesuit, was that they used to go to this new land and say that they don't have any religion. Now, based on the power of the ruler, they used to give two options to the people. Either you accept the Bible or you accept the sword, which is either you get killed or you accept the Bible. And therefore, most of South America and North America was made Christianized because of the second motivation, which is God. So the same church which did not allow for exploration for centuries, once they got to know that there's a new area which they can conquer why religiously, they actually funded it. And this is the first instance of proper hypocrisy from the church. And the last motivation which the people had, or the king had, was gold, because most of South America was actually very resource rich. South America was very resource rich. This would not be true of north. This area not so much, but this is very resource rich. Now the people also had motivations to cross over into North America. So whilst there was one set of motivations from the rulers, there was also one more set, which is basically people wanted to cross over for three reasons. First is that they wanted, if you're a Protestant, you want to go to this new world and find a small space for yourself where you're not religiously persecuted, because the church still hated you. Second was better economic opportunity. See, what will happen is the population of Europe will start to increase. So people were becoming more and more poverty stricken. So they got an opportunity to go, if even if it was about risking your life and crossing over after 3 months, the point was you could get a new life in the new world. So very simply, what we've done till this point is we understood the concept of how Columbus reached Bahamas and initiated the process of colonization. The whole backstory has been given to you. Spanish and the Portuguese led the exploration. I've also told you what are the two motivations for the European states and the people of Europe to be interested in the New World. One is national glory, the other one is bullion, gold, and silver, then conversion and Catholicism. Spanish and the Portuguese pushed quite a lot. On the other hand, the English were not that interested. The same way people wanted to, in a way, evade religious persecution, population started to increase, better economic opportunity. Now, now, do we understand why colonization happened? Because now I want to go into the discussion related to the examination. Everything had been building up till this point. Why the English were late? English were late in India also. That is a standard English concept. They were not very keen initially for exploration. It needs money, and the English kings were not that interested. The same reason why East India Company was still a joint stock company, not a royal company. Three G's: glory for the king, God for the Christians, the Catholic Christianity to spread, and gold for the development of the state. Glory means not way of living, for the king, both old and new world concept. Are we clear with regards to this? Because now we change our orientation. This all was just about telling you the development of America, the way we found America, this and that. Now can we shift to the real purpose, which is American Revolution? Okay. Evangelican, Kishan, don't use that word. You are using it from there. Yes, Chinmay. Now understand one thing. Now I'm going to teach you American Revolution, and understand one point very clearly. The American Revolution, how did Judaism come up? Soumya, you're taking me a totally different direction. Abrahamic religion, you want to talk about Judaism, Christianity, Islam, not of any purpose to me. Now, please understand this point, that the American Revolution does not happen in across America, but only this area. Only this area. Whilst all history is European, everything else is British centric. So understand this point, that the American Revolution has nothing to do with Latin America, has nothing to do with North America, other than this area as of right now. And the second most important point is, I don't care about Latin America because UPSC doesn't. I don't care about how they got colonized, decolonized, this and that, because I was, or you were, we were ruled by the British. Our history is British centric. So we are going to discuss British history centric, English based American Revolution. So my experience only pertains to this area. This is where the American Revolution actually operated. These are called initially the 9 and then later the 13 colonies of the British in America, from Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. Don't have to remember their names, but these are basically the colonies which we are talking about. We are not talking about anything else. These are the colonies which today basically expanded into what we today call as the United States of America. Started as 9, then became 13, then became 50. So very simply, this is called the United States of America. I don't care about Canada. I don't care about Mexico. I don't care about anything else. So very simply, very simply, now we will change our geography and we have to now understand the American Revolution. Can I do that? Do you understand which geography we are in and why we are discussing only this part? This does not apply to any other part of America. Yes. Later colonized America, how Portuguese, Spanish got reduced in America. We will discuss that, Ilma. That will come to. Earlier we had land, now we were... Again, Abhishek, that's a way of saying base very simply for spreading. Okay, let's go forward. Now, finally, after a very long discussion, I've reached a point where I wanted to reach, but it has taken me close to 1.5 hours. But that is all worth it because you understand Renaissance, Reformation, everything. So for anybody who has just woken up but was in class, just to remind you what we've done till this point, very simply, we've understood how Age of Discovery happened. We've now understood the understanding of why there was colonization, and we've now also understood the geography in which we are operating. Now, Eastern coast is later. That is called westward expansion. That is American history, separate issue altogether. Now comes the real portion from which the examination will ask you questions, which is Jesuit is a Catholic Christian missionary who converts. Jesuit. Now let's talk about America. Let's talk about America. Now, please pay attention. I am now building up to the American Revolution. And see, in the examination, only two types of questions can be asked from this area: cause and significance. There are two types of questions which are always asked. More or less every module which you will see, these are the only two areas from which the questions can be made also. Cause, significance, cause, significance, cause, significance. Now the question which will come is, what were the reasons why the American Revolution happened? And the second would be, what is the significance of the American Revolution? But in order to understand the cause, let's try to decode this whole sector for you. Now, the American colonies were more or less concentrated. Now, I'll again qualify something. These are called the British American colonies. Now, whenever I say the word British, I mean England. And whenever I say British America, I mean America. But I'm very categorically not using America and Britain right now, because for a very simple reason, this is an extension of the British. So you have the British American colonies. They are concentrated in this sector. Now I want 100% attention towards me, because now we are building up to something very important, which is the cause of the American Revolution. Now, see, the British American colonies, they have a problem. They have a problem. See, whilst Mexico may have a lot of resources, Brazil has a lot of resources, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, major resources, gold, diamond, silver, quite a lot. This is a useless part of America. Literally useless part of America. Though it is on the coast, the problem is that upwards of this point, there is extreme cold. And the problem with this sector is because there is one mountain range here which does not allow the Britishers to move more inward. What is this mountain range here? Very good. Yes, they call the Appalachians. The Appalachian Mountains, the problem is that they do not allow the movement of the Britishers inwards. And when it comes to the physiography and the geomorphology of this sector, this is very not very fertile land. Not very fertile land, except for this sector. Except for this sector, which is in a way a little bit in the torrid zone, it is more or less not very fertile. Now, the concept is why do you get a colony? Why do you invest in a colony? What is the reason to get a colony? Profit, to exploit resources, very good, earn something. But now the British are stuck. In this area, there is land, but no resources. It has no gold and silver. It can give you fur, which is you can kill the animals here, make coats. But this sector is more or less useless if you go by the basic resource value. This was not true of South America, but the Americans or the British America is more or less useless to the Britishers if they don't try to figure out something. Now, I need that world map, yes. Yes. Now, pay attention. This is the sector we are talking about. And very simply, this sector has no resource value. This sector has no resource value. This is British America. You have England here. Yes, Sanskar. Yes. Now, England at this point of time wants a lot of things. For example, it wants coffee, rubber, tea, sugar, rice. These are things which they want. India has still not become a viable colony for them. It is in the process of becoming a viable colony. But these are the things which are quite in demand in England and in Europe. There's something common with all of these different crops. Can anybody tell me what is common to all of them? Very good. They are tropical crops, mostly plantation based, commercial cash crops, which need tropical environment, which is a little bit of what we call as torrid environment, cannot be produced in a country like England, because England is in the temperate zone. Now, England could see something. It could see that British America, specifically the southern colonies of British America, they could produce these commodities. It will produce these commodities. But there's an issue. While in British America, you have land is available. What is the resource which is scarce here? What is the resource which is scarce here? Very good. Labor. Labor is the problem. You have thousands and thousands of acre of land and nobody to produce. And now tell me, the point was people were traveling from Europe to British America. But in British America, when you reach, they were ready to give you hundreds of acres. And that is why till today, the land holding in America is very, very big. Hundreds of acres is there. But you tell me one thing, if you were a Bhikhari in England, if you were a laborer in England, would you want to again be a laborer or Bhikhari in British America? No. So people said, you give me land, I will not work. I will not work. The problem with these commodities is very, very labor intensive, plantation crops, tropical. So while land is available, the climate is also perfect, but labor isn't. So now England can make the British Americas viable if they find a solution for labor. And that solution will come from Africa. See, what the English will do is that they will travel to West Africa. Africa is at this point of time has multiple tribes. And these tribes have a very important characteristic. And the tribe have very, very important characteristic, which is that they fight very fiercely. And when a tribe wins against the other one, they have this ritual of making what we call as POWs or prisoners of war. So, for example, the Zulu tribe was fighting with the Ashanti, and for example, the Zulus won. So, what will happen is that whole Ashanti tribe will be taken as prisoner and as a form of a bonded slave type concept within their own society itself. So there's no pan-Africanism that we all are Africans, we are all brothers, not that concept. They have very strong tribal identity, very standard across India. Also, Dasa Dasi tradition was there. Across the world, there have been multiple forms of slaves. And this is the concept of Zulu and Ashanti taking each other as prisoners. Now, the English found this as an interesting way of finding a solution for British America, which was that the English took luxury items, guns, manufactured goods to West Africa, and from here the English used to say, we want nothing, you just give those Ashanti tribe people to us. They are useless to you, you give it to us. Very simply, the English used to buy what are called slaves. Black slavery developed in this period because of the non-viability of the British Americas, and the Africans were ready to sell their own fellow Africans as commodities, because black slavery is one of the worst form of slavery, because it is in this humans are considered as commodities. And herein the slaves were picked up in huge numbers, and they used to go to the British Americas. Here they were sold, slaves were sold as literal commodities, and the plantations were developed around these slaves. And this in turn led to the flow of commodities which Britain needed. And this is the famous what we call as triangular trade, wherein manufactured goods, luxury items, and guns used to go to Africa. From Africa, slaves were picked up. They were pushed into the Caribbean islands, into different parts of America. Here, they produced these commodities, and these commodities were then sent to England. These were sent to England, and England used to consume it or sell it to the Europeans. This is how British America was made viable. Anybody has any issue in the triangular trade? Anybody has any issue in this triangular trade? No? Okay, very good. Fine. Very good. But there is still a small, what is the name of triangle? It's called triangular trade. Triangular trade between England, Africa, and America. Slaves were nothing but Africans selling their fellow Africans as commodities in exchange of goods. Okay. And it sounds inhumane. Yes, it is. Was it developed by very categorically developed by Europeans? Yes, it's what the idea was given by the Europeans itself. So it was there. Now, there were no American slaves or American labor. Very low. You would rather want to be an American landlord than actually be a labor. And as it is, the labor demand for all of these commodities is very, very big. Now, one thing is very, very clear, that this is the only way the British can actually make sense of this area. Nobody has no issue till this point. The people who had an issue have written their questions. What kind of commodities were sold from America to England? The same things, these things: coffee, rubber, tea, sugar, rice, cotton. I'll give you a more elaborate picture of this and you will understand this. This is an official, out of a very interesting book. It's called Eric Foner, Give Me Liberty. See, from England, they take manufactured goods to Ivory Coast, Gold Coast, Slave Coast. From there, they take slaves and gold to West Indies and the British colonies. From British colonies, they take what we call as the manufactured goods back to England itself. This is called the triangle or the triangular trade. It's a racial concept, totally racial concept. Now, if this makes sense, I want to go into the next step of this discussion. Slave trade was done by everybody. The Portuguese were the pioneers. The Portuguese, Spanish, English, French, everybody did slave trade. Okay. What is this slave coast? From slave coast, mostly the ports were developed from which slaves were taken. Gold Coast, gold was taken. Ivory was taken. Can we move forward? Can we do it? Please, because this is still half of the story. How much time does it take? 3 months, more or less 3 to 4 months to cross the Atlantic. Yes, okay. Now see, then after what? The manufactured goods were exchanged for slaves. Now see, England has made British America viable. Slavery was present in Europe. That is called black. Slavery was there in India also. Dasa Dasi tradition. But this is black slavery. Commodity-based slavery, where people are considered commodity, is not something which was ever done in history before this. That is why black slavery is totally different concept. Chattel slavery, it is called. They used to kill the slaves. They used to say, the way I treat this remote, they used to treat people. That's the basic one. Slavery existed previously also, but this type of slavery never existed. Now, first part of the story was to make this sector viable, which they've made. But the English still want something tangible. What would be that tangible thing? This is making this sector viable economically. What is that tangible thing which the British could get out of this story? Very good. Which is money. But British want money. They want pounds. The British have made the British Americas viable by linking it with the larger trade. However, money is still not generated. Money is still not generated. And in order to, please pay attention again, in order to generate revenue out of this relationship, in order to generate revenue out of this relationship, they introduced what we call as the navigation laws. Three laws were there, and these three laws were basically to regulate trade and generate revenue out of triangular trade. Can I discuss the navigation laws with you? And this is basically the one of the first reasons for which the American Revolution will happen, and it's a very interesting discussion we need to have. Okay, now see, the British were smart, and we should not be very surprised by that. The British were smart because the first law, and these laws only, no, it's not like Blue Waters policy. It applies only between England and British America. Blue Waters policy applied to the Arabian Sea. Now, the first law said that any ship which operates between England and British America it needed to be registered and owned by a British citizen in England. See, this is a very interesting thing, which is that they wanted to make sure that all ships were manufactured in England. Because if you are a ship manufacturer here, the person who will buy your ship will be a British American, which is a Britisher sitting in America. And therefore, that ship cannot operate. However, every ship which is there in this sector had to be owned by an English citizen from England. So very simply, this creates a monopoly for the British shipbuilding industry, because any ship produced here, you can internally use these ships, but any ship for transatlantic trade had to be British. So the consequence of this is monopoly over shipbuilding. Pay attention. The British argued that any ship which could operate between British America and England had to be owned by a British citizen, and therefore a Britisher sitting in England. And if therefore you had a shipbuilding industry in America, it was more or less useless because you could not take it to England for the trade. So in the triangular trade, ironically, 90% of all ships were British. And therefore, the British shipbuilding industry in England had a monopoly. Anybody has any issue in the words which I've said right now? Imagine that the government of India says that any travel between Delhi to Mumbai can only happen if that car is owned by, has a Delhi number, DL number. That's the basic thing. What is they're trying to argue? The simple straightforward point is it has to be registered and owned by a British citizen. Therefore, England is the one which profits out of it because they create a very big industry for their shipbuilding industry, and they also protected by not allowing Americans to produce any form of ships which could be used for transatlantic trade. As I said, think of it like this: any ship between Britain and America, or like Delhi and Mumbai, it has to be registered in Delhi. That was Africa and Africa and America, and Africa to England is totally different. It's just this movement between these 2 points. Anybody has any issue in this? If not, I move to the second and third laws, which are much more important than these two. Have to be clear, please. Right now will become more and more, little bit more complex. Okay. Now, why British America could not? Because the British does this. If you are a colony, why will they give you the right to produce something which they can all produce themselves? Okay. But American can make ships and register it. That will not happen again. Again, Chituri, that will not happen. Why would an Englishman build a ship here and then bring it to England? It takes 4 months to do that. That makes no sense, not viable. See, the British were very smart. They had subsidiary laws also. For example, they had the Iron Act, that any iron which was produced in England could only be produced in America. America could not produce its own irons. It had Hat Act, Wool Act. All of these acts basically gave a monopoly to the British. This is what the British does. The simple straightforward point is no iron can be produced in America. No hats can be produced in America. Every hat owned in America was actually made in England. Every wool, one thread of wool was produced in Britain because they wanted to give their own industries a push. So these are things wherein they are making sure that their own industries have a monopoly. So I'm only talking about England, Mona Lisa. I don't care about the Portuguese and the Spanish. They are of no purpose to me. Only England introduced navigation laws. So navigation laws only apply to the British and the British Americas. So Iron Act, Hat Act, Wool Act, First Law all argued that the shipbuilding industry, the iron industry, the hat industry, the wool industry, all were protected in America. All were protected in Britain. Can I move to the second and third law? I want everybody's assertion. This is not difficult. Have to just pay attention to what I'm saying. Stop getting distracted. Pay attention and it will actually make sense. Okay. Now, the second and third law were actually the bedrock of producing revenue from America. Now, please pay attention. Now, for example, this is the rest of the world. This is ROW. 1 second, I'll change the color. Second and third law. This is ROW, which is rest of the world. This is England. And this is British America. This is British America. Now, for example, British America produces sugar. Produces sugar. Now, I'm a French trader. I'm a German trader. Should I have the right to buy or transact as a British American? Should I have the right to buy and sell with the French and the Germans? Yes, this is what Adam Smith taught you? Laissez-faire politics, free trade. That a British American should be able to sell to the rest of the world. And if I'm a French, very good wine I produce, very good wine I produce, and I want to sell it to the British Americans. So the rest of the world should also have the right to sell it to the British Americans. Very simply, there should be a direct trade between British America and rest of the world. This is how trade works, right? This is how trade works. There should be a right for the rest of the world to trade with the British America and the British America to trade with the rest of the world. Yes or no? Yes or no? This is how trade works. Yes? Okay. Very good. But the British are again smart. The British said through the second and the third law, no direct trade between the rest of the world and British America was allowed. If a British American wants to trade with the rest of the world, first bring the commodities to England, unload it, then load it into a different ship and give it to the rest of the world. And if the French want to sell to the British Americas, you give it to the English, they would be happy to give it to the British Americans. Very simply, the English sector becomes a node. There cannot be, this trade was not allowed. Any trade was mediated between the world with the rest of the world via England. Via England. And what would the English gain out of it? The English would gain custom duty, custom duty, custom duty. So the British said, "Bhai, हमने बनाया है. We have made it. How can you use it?" A very good example of this will be how we supply bats in gully cricket. But if you bring the bat, so every first ball is a try ball. If you get out, you will take the bat with you. So England said that if we have created British America for us, then why should you have the direct control with it or direct contact with it? The British generated out of the triangular trade custom duty based revenue out of the British Americas. So to bring the whole story together, see, one second, to bring the whole story together, in order to make British America viable as a colony, two strategies were applied. Custom duty, import duty, export duty, CVD, whatever you want to call it. First was link it with the triangular trade and make it part of British Empire. This generates commodities for England. And the second one was navigation navigation laws which gave monopoly to industries in England, and second, generated revenue in the form of custom duties at all ports. This generates money or profit for English. And if you understand this, I'll give you a 5-minute break because I want to go into something heavy after this. Is this perfect? Is this totally clear? What I've been talking about? Because I have to discuss something very important with you. That is why I want to give you a 5-minute breather. All these were isolating British America from rest of the world. Yes. There was no direct trade between British America and rest of the world. All trade was in the hand of the British. Yes, entire process was British oriented. Obviously, that is why you are going to exploit it. If this is clear, I give you a break. We come back at 8:55 and we take the street in everybody's writing yes. Very good. Very good. All non-Indian history makes sense. Okay. So I'll see you at 8:55. Yes. And that important concept is, see, let's look at the attitude of the Britishers and British Americans on or as of 1750. As of 1750. And the concept is very straightforward. Now I'm basically going to discuss the first cause of the American Revolution. Okay, I have a region which controlled. No, they did not gain it from Portugal or Spain. It was independently developed. Now see, if I'm a British American in 1750 with the navigation laws and basically this arrangement, would I be happy or would I be not very happy with the relationship with the English? Happy or not very happy? Not happy, very, very sad, not happy. No, it's the other way around. See, the residents of America identify themselves as British Americans. So Europeans first. And you all are saying that they would not be happy. But the fact of the matter is, if the British don't exist, would the British Americans have slaves? Would they have trade? Would they have commodities? Would they have any other form of economic value or economic opportunity? No. भाई बाप है. That at the end of the day, that the British make America viable and all economic opportunity is because of them. Okay, you have to give a tax. They are not unhappy with the taxation, because they believe it is the part and parcel of being part of the British Empire. But if I tell you that I will get you a job for 2 crores a month, and I ask you that you give me 10 lakh rupees per month out of it, would you allow me to get you that job? 2 crores a month, but you have to pay 10 lakh rupees to me. Yes, because you are ready to pay the premium, because the economic opportunity is very, very big. So here, there's something also very peculiar. All taxes apply to merchants because they are trade-based taxes. So very simply, if I'm a British American, I don't mind this relationship as of right now. But the more important attitude is of the Britisher. Let's talk about the other side. Now, the British attitude towards British America was also very interesting. See, their understanding was, we have not invested too much into the British Americas. It's not like India that we have to build the railways. We have an ICS officer. We have proper what we call as a bureaucracy, judiciary. We are investing quite a lot in India. We are not investing too much in British America. We've just connected them to the whole system. And therefore, the British believe that any revenue generated is a bonus. It's a bonus. So the British attitude is that, okay, it only gives me 5 lakh pounds, but I invested only 1 lakh pound. So the British attitude is like, everything which I get out of America, be it anything, is prasadam. It's prasad, mata ka prasad hai. Jo bhi aa jaye, whatever comes, we are happy with it. So very simply, the British have invested extremely low amount of money in development of the colony. So any revenue generated, be it small, is acceptable. We call this attitude a win-win situation. We call it this attitude a win-win situation. I'll give you a very simple example of this, and you will understand it even more closely, because you may have gone through it, or you may be living it right now, but not commentary on anybody. Is that, think of it like this, that the Britisher are the parents and the British Americans are the children. The Britishers sent these children to a college in which the fees was maximum 20,000 per year. The whole course was done in 80 or 90,000 rupees. And now this British America child is sitting with a degree which cost only 90,000 in this day and age. Now, if this British America child sits unemployed at home, would the parents mind it? No. Same way, if the British America parent has only invested 90,000 and this British America gets a job for 40 or 50,000 rupees per month, will it be acceptable to the Britisher or the parent? Yes. because whatever you can get out of that degree, if 50,000 you can get, it's a bonus, because your investment in that child was extremely low. So because the Britishers had not invested too much in British America, everything and anything was acceptable. So it was a win-win situation. This type of relationship would not have applied to India, because in India, the British had to fight wars, the British had to develop certain machinery, British had to bring in the concept of bureaucracy, judiciary. The investment was quite big. So if India did not generate revenue, would it have been acceptable for the British to do it in 1850 or 1860? And the answer is a very big resounding no. But here, everybody is happy with this relationship. Hum saath saath hai. It's a good, happy family. We are happy to be British Americans. They are happy to exploit us, whatever they are getting. Is this starting point clear? Because this goes into your introduction of a cause. That the cause introduction is going to be that on the eve of the American Revolution, the British Americans were happy with the relationship with Britain, and wherein Britishers were also contended with and found it acceptable to generate whatever percentage or whatever part of revenue they could generate. Are you getting the point of this discussion? Because today, before we leave class today, I discussed with you the most important cause of the American Revolution, which is going to be the 7 Years' War and the changes in the British, in the American attitudes. American people accept British sovereignty, which, yes, because it creates a win-win situation for both of them. Can I now move to the cause, first cause of the American Revolution? Why were they happy, and then why the revolution? That is the question I'm going to answer now. Very good. Okay. Now in the period between 1750, rather we'll say between 1700 and 1750, and I'll change the date here to 1700. There are multiple things which are going to happen. British Americans are local people of America? No. All local population, indigenous population of America was killed. Red Indians were exterminated. All Americans today are Europeans. Remember this point. All Americans are Europeans. Between 1700 and 1750, there will be, in the British American side, there will be an ideological change and new ideas will come to the continent. And a lot of you have already taken the name. Were they killed because they were a problem? The name of that moment is called the Enlightenment. See, Enlightenment is an intellectual movement which happened in Europe, specifically in France, wherein certain philosophers started to talk about certain very interesting things. Together, Locke, Voltaire, Rousseau, Kant, together these scholars, we will discuss Enlightenment in the French Revolution also in more detail, Montesquieu, they argued about 3 to 4 important concepts. First is called constitutional government, separation of power, separation of state and church, and the most important, social contract. See, Locke, Montesquieu were very important in arguing that the constitutional government, which is the government of the people, is the right type of government vis-a-vis monarchy. They were also the people who argued about separation of powers, which is legislative, judiciary, and executives have or should have different spheres of operation. Voltaire was the one who argued that the religion should always be separated from the state. But the most important is Kant and Rousseau, specifically Immanuel Kant. Kant argued about a concept called social contract. And the concept of social contract was very simple, which is that what are the first three words of our preamble? What are the first three words of our preamble? First three words of our preamble. We the people. Yes, very good. So very simply, what this concept of we the people comes from social contract. That the government does not draw power from any divine law or from itself. It devises or it gets its power from we the people. We the people. We the people are the ones who go into a social contract that we all have fundamental rights, but we are ready to have reasonable restrictions on them so that we all pool that reasonable restriction together and create a state so that it creates and protects the rights which we have today, which is called civil liberties. Enlightenment was a concept which developed in France. They're called the philosophies or the philosophers from France. Locke, Voltaire, Rousseau, Kant, and Montesquieu talked about democracy, talked about separation of power, talked about separation of religion and state. But the most important concept was that we, the people, are the source of the power of the state and not the king. Kings used to argue that they used to get power from the divine intervention, from God. But here people said, no, we are the people who give up our own liberties to some extent to create a state so that you can protect our liberties. So the state is nothing but a social contract between people. So very simply, these were very revolutionary ideas for this age, which is called the age of enlightenment. And what will happen is that these ideas will start to spread in America through the press, through books, through newspaper, and through different pamphlets. And very simply, the Americans will start to now develop certain concepts of civil liberties. Civil liberties means right to life, right to property, right to freedom, right to make choices, whatever right you have. Your fundamental rights are civil liberties. So very simply, enlightenment will now start to percolate into America. So if I'm an American and I get to hear about concept of freedom, liberty, separation of state, would it change my attitude? Would it change my attitude? Yes, Vejshri. Yes, very good. Yes, very good. It will change my attitude. So there's an attitudinal change which comes here, in which they will start to question the relationship. But the American Revolution did not happen because of just American attitudes changing. It was the British which triggered this, what we call as American Revolution. Can I discuss the British part? And this is the last discussion we have for today. Yes, enlightenment led to the way Americans thought differently, so it led to it was one of the causes of the American Revolution. Okay, very good. Now, see, the British attitude pre 1753 or 1750 was whatever comes out is acceptable, because the investment was very minimal. Now, across the world, or specifically in Europe rather, between 1740 to 48 and between 1756 to 1763, there were two wars which happened. Can anybody tell me what are these wars? 1740 to 48. You've done it in your modern India, for sure. For sure. This is yes, the context for the Carnatic Wars. These are Sneha, the king used to control. Yes, this is called the Austrian War of Succession, and this is called the 7 Years War. Very good, perfect. Now, just to give you certain context, see, in Europe, pay attention. In Europe, there's a concept, and the concept is, see, a throne, a king's throne, is occupied by a person. That person comes from a family which is called dynasty. So across Europe, when a king used to die, all dynasties of Europe used to have a stake in who will become the next king or queen, whatever it is. Now, Austria, which is called the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Austria, there was a king. Now he dies in 1740. Now, when he dies, again, I'm giving you the very simple, straightforward. I hope you would have done it in your what we call as modern India, but I'm repeating it for the sake of just revising it with you. When Austria, the king dies, he had a daughter, and the name of that daughter was Maria Theresa. Now, Maria Theresa claimed that under the laws of Austria, which had been changed in 1713, she should become the next queen of Austria. However, there was one conservative faction in Austria which said that 1713 law was incorrect, and Charles II, he was called, a cousin of the king, should become the next king. Now, over this issue of a daughter becoming the next queen, whole of Europe will get divided. And one power which actually supported queens was England, Great Britain. Great Britain has a whole series of queens. One of their queens recently died. So Maria Theresa was supported by England. However, France is a very conservative Catholic country. It said, no, Charles II will become the king. And over this issue, there will be a war in Austria, which is called the Austrian War of Succession, which is Maria Theresa versus Charles. And it is basically a war which will divide Europe into two parts, wherein Austria will have Britain as its ally versus France, which will be heading other countries like Prussia and other factions in arguing that no, Maria Theresa cannot become the queen. Maria Theresa will not become the queen. If you've not done it in modern India, I'm doing it here. This is called the Austrian War of Succession. This is called the Austrian War of Succession. And ironically, you can see that Britain is now against France and Spain. Now, whilst in 1740-48, the Austrian War of Succession impacted India because the first Carnatic War happened because of the Austrian War of Succession. In America, it did not spill over. Whilst the Austrian War of Succession spilled over as Anglo-French rivalry in India, it did not spill over into America. However, what will happen is that in 1756, Maria Theresa, who had won the Austrian War of Succession, she will die. Once she will die, the issue again comes up. And once the issue again comes up, now again, Britain is against France and Spain over the Spain issue or the same issue. And therefore, now they will again fight a war over the same issue who will come to power in Austria, which is called the 7 Years' War. But the 7 Years' War is very interesting because it will spill over both into America and into India. In India, it spilled over as the Third Carnatic War, but in America, it also became problematic. Now, if I go back to the map of America, tell me one thing. If the French are sitting here and the Spanish are sitting here, are the American colonies of Britain safe in this sector? No? Very good. You think like a Britisher. So very simply, what is going to happen is, in the context of the 7 Years' War, the British will send multiple troops, regiments to America. Investment in protecting the Americas will increase, and by 1763, national debt in England had doubled. And in this context, George III will become the King of England, and his Prime Minister is going to be a person called Lord North. Now, understand this point. The precondition to this win-win situation was what? National debt, because they had to borrow to send a lot of arms, ammunition, men. The precondition to this win-win situation was that Britishers have low investment. Perfect. Now, what has happened is, because of the 7 Years' War, the investment has exponentially increased because the cost of defense increased. So the 7 Years' War, in which England, Prussia, Austria were against France and Spain, Britain public expenditure, taxes, national debt increased, because when the Peace of Paris will happen, in which basically Britain will win the Austrian War of Succession with Maria Theresa, the 7 Years' War in that regard, while France will give certain portions to Britain, wherein Canada will be given to Britain, the Spanish will give Florida to the British. The point was, British interest and expenditure had changed. And this is the point I want you to remember for 24 hours, which is that pre-1756, it was a win-win situation. However, post-1756, which is post 7 Years' War, the British investment had gone up exponentially. So if it has gone up exponentially, will they be satisfied with what they were getting from America? Will they be satisfied with what they were getting with America? No. And therefore, the first cause of the American Revolution was the 7 Years' War. Because the 7 Years' War is going to change the British attitude. I'm going to summarize everything before we leave for today. But before I do that, I'm trying to build up for tomorrow. The simple straightforward point is, remember this for 24 hours, that the 7 Years' War is going to destabilize this whole point. And because the British American, these 9 to 13 colonies were previously separated to each other, now they were fighting as one, as British colonies. They also started to develop a certain sense of unity. So now I'm trying to summarize what I've done from the first point till this point. Can I do that? And then we can break for today. I'll summarize everything and we'll stop at that point. That fact you will remember. Okay, perfect. Now, see, we started at a point between 1600, 1700. 1600, 1700. The situation was very straightforward. Let's not even take it 1600. Let's make it 1500. Simple. Between 1500 to 1700, Britain integrated, this is basically me making notes for you, integrated America into a British America into the triangular trade of British Empire, generated commodities through Navigation Act, generated revenue. So on or as of 1700, Britain and British America were happy with their relationship. They get trade, economic opportunities, and they get generate revenue and commodities. Precondition: British investment needs to remain low. Now come the 7 Years' War. Why are we calling British America as British America? We are calling it British America because as of right now, an American sitting in, a person sitting in America identify himself as Britisher first, then American. Later, this is going to change. This is what I'm coming to. Now, there will be enlightenment between 1700 and 1800. Rather, let's make it 1750. Enlightenment change the attitude of British Americans. They will have start to develop two things: sense of questioning the relationship and sense of Americanness. Identify themselves as Americans, not British Americans. And on the other hand, you will have the 7 Years' War, which will be significant. Why? Because it will exponentially increase the investment of Britain on the Americas. They want more. Can you hold on to these points for tomorrow? Yes, you can. So one point I want to emphasize here, yes, this influence of enlightenment, idea of civil liberty, life, liberty, property, freedom, liberty, and representation. Press will start to become more and more important. First printing press will come up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Political pamphlet, books, libraries will develop. First newspaper will come up by 1704, and they will develop a new ethic or American concept: self-assurance, rationalism, liberty. Now, what I want from you is, see, this is the starting of the story. What I want from you, you can do two things. Go through the annotated PPT before we meet tomorrow at 6 a.m. Or you can watch the video again. You know that you have the video as recorded and you can watch it again. You can do either things. But what I want from you is that tomorrow, please avoid the Gajini effect, which is that what America, which America, what navigation act, arey ye kya hota hai, what, no, who Lord North, what America, what attitude. Don't do that. I don't want this, that I have to teach you again 3.5 hours to reach to this point. What I want is, I want you to revise these 2 slides so that you understand that tomorrow when I talk about Stamp Act and when I start to discuss the acts, you are totally in line with me and we are at the same point together. So tomorrow we finish American Revolution, and it is the American Revolution which triggered the French Revolution. Also, we'll talk about the French Revolution also. But I hope that this all made sense to you. The way of teaching is making sense to you. The pace is fine. And generally, though what we call as world history is a little bit technical, you are finding it interesting and easy. If these things are totally fine, have a very, very productive day. And I will see you tomorrow at 6 a.m. The SMEs are there, but please don't know Gajini effect, which is, don't forget over 24 hours, revise either the PPT or go through the video. Totally your call, totally your point. Try to generate interest. You will realize all of this is very significant for American plus Indian plus world history generally. Right? Okay. Thank you. If you don't have a question, you can leave. I'll take some of the questions now. Thank you. Take care. Have a very productive day. Thank you so much. Okay. King was George III. Yes, we will start from there. Treaty of Paris, both France and Britain returned regents. Yes, but Britain gained Canada in that. What advantage did British have over the Britishers? Advantages did British Americans? Nothing. They were obligated to help the Britishers because they gave them economic power or economic opportunity. Thank you. Thank you. I will see you tomorrow 6 a.m. Don't be late. I will revise with you first thing and then we'll move forward. Who is British American? Very good. A person who is sitting in America and has come from Europe or Britain is a British American. Who is Sita? You're basically asking me. 3 points to remember: 7 Years' War, Enlightenment. Before that, all led to, yes, everything was built up. If you realize, 2 hours was all built up to this point. That you understand Navigation Act, that you understand the concept of 7 Years' War, that you understand the Austrian War of Succession, you understand how was America found. Yes? Okay. Other than Europe, no one tries to explore. No, Deepika, because India, China were already very resource rich. They did not need to. Tell us the points to revise. These are the points to revise. What have I said? Again, forgetting within 5 minutes. These are the points to revise. Whatever I've written down. France versus Britain war name. It was called it was basically called the French Wars, or what we call as the American Wars. There's no name for that. Why did we not study about Red Indians? Because we don't care about them. The Britishers did not care about it. As it is, I don't care about them. Not part of your syllabus. Will you be teaching ancient India? Yes, I will be teaching you ancient India. Black slaves or Africans? What is the problem in USA blacks and whites issue? Shivaji, first let me give America independence. Then we'll do industrial revolution. Then we'll talk about black and black and white issue. Don't worry about that. You're asking me about today, the African American movement. That's a separate issue altogether. Who was in North America? Spain, France, and England. Win-win situation is low investment, some revenue, get some taxation, but get economic opportunity. Difference between noble and clergy. Nobles are the relatives of the king. Clergy is related to the church. Yes, Megha, if I'm here, how will I take CNA? Yes, Malala, the next modern batches, weekend and evening I will take. Because it is by birth, because you're born into aristocracy, born into church. You're not born into church, but basically if you're born into clergy and you're born into nobility, by birth, all things are there. Varna system, caste system, all that.